Hello there everyone. In today's tutorial I'm going to show you how to make a fully beaded flat wirework Kumihimo bracelet, and this is what it looks like. So this is actually Kumihimo braid but done with wire, and then we've just added beads all the way along to give this nice effect. And obviously these are just the materials that I've used. It'd be fun to play around with different kinds of materials, both the wire, so the thickness of the wire you can use different ones, but also the beads themselves. You don't have to use specifically these equivalent to ones I've used here. So these are 3mm rounds. You could play around with other sizes and shapes as well. So that's what it looks like. So if you want to learn how to make this, then stay tuned. So it's these materials here that we're going to need. Now first of all we need our wire. In this case I'm working with a regular round 0.8mm wire, and that's just what I'm going to be demonstrating with. You can use a different gauge, so smaller or larger, that's completely up to you. And then the beads that I'm using here are 3mm rounds, and I'm just working with a blue coated hematite gemstone bead. So you can use whatever you want really. All you have to make sure of is that the holes in your beads are large enough for your wire to go through, so whatever wire that you're using. But you can also use other beads, like I said. You can even use some other shapes as well. So for instance, say rondelles would work really well as well. It's completely up to you and what you would like for your piece. Then we also need our ribbon ends here to finish off the bracelet. In this case I'm using some 8mm ribbon ends. They're going to work perfectly the size wise for what I'm going to end up with my bracelet. Now you can use different sizes of these depending if you want to make yours different. So if you want to use more wires, or if you're using a different gauge, you might have to change up the size of the ribbon ends to match that. And then extender chain, lobster claw clasp, and just some jump rings here. And then finally, most importantly as well though, we also need our square Kumihimo disc. So I'm going to be working with that one because that's what we need to make the flat Kumihimo braid. So let's get it all together and let's get started. So then the lengths of wire that we'll need is 7 lengths here of about 40cm each, and that'll be just right for the bracelet length that we're going to make. And then what we need to do as well with all the lengths of wire here is we need to just fasten them all together on one end. So because obviously we need to be able to work with them on the Kumihimo disc. So just make sure all the ends are nice and even like that. Push them all together. And then to fasten them, what we need to do is I'm going to start taking one of my lengths of wire and I'm just going to move up a little bit, about maybe 5 to 7 centimeters or so. Going to single that one wire out, and then I'm going to just take it and start wrapping it around the other ones, and I'm going to do it pretty nice and tight. I just wrap it a few times here, or wrap it all the way till the end of the wire. I'm just going to keep wrapping here till I've used the whole thing. You can just finish it off with a pair of pliers, because obviously you also want to make sure, just make sure to get rid of the ends there. So whether you cut them down and then squeeze them in, or whether you use the full length, because we're going to, to begin with, we're going to hold this in our hands, and you want to make sure you don't have those little ends sticking out. It's going to really irritate your skin. So what we're going to do is we need to do more than this, because what you'll see is if you just do this one wrap and then put this on the disc, your other wires will be able to slip straight through this. So when you start making your braid, you're probably going to pull them out. So that won't be the best. So what I'm going to do is I've got my first wrap there. I'm going to single out another wire, just take whichever one, then I'm going to do the same, bend it up against that first wrap, then I'm also going to wrap this around. And this doesn't have to be particularly neat because this is just to hold it together at the end. I'm going to cut this off and not use this. Obviously you could make it neat and then incorporate this into your project, that's completely up to you. Again, I'm just going to squeeze this in so the little end there isn't sticking out. There we go, that's another one. And I actually want to go through and I want to make sure I use all of my wires, because if you just leave one hanging that's not been wrapped, that can pull through, and you always want to make sure to avoid that. So when you start making your braid, you're not going to run into the problem. I'm going to take the next one, do the exact same thing. So you're just going to keep doing this, one wire at a time, working your way down until you've only got the one wire left sticking out, because then obviously you can't wrap that around anything because you won't have any more wires to wrap it around. But then I'm going to show you what I just do with that last one then. So now that I wrapped all my wires and I just have that one left here, like I said, you want to make sure to also use this, because otherwise that's the one that's going to be able to then pull through. So what I'm going to do is just take a pair of round nose pliers and then go right to the end of it And then I'm just going to start wrapping this around. So basically make a bit of a spiral here. Again, doesn't have to be neat unless you want to use it for something, obviously. And basically this is all going to be to stop this from slipping through, while, because we wrapped it here, it's still not going to have the end sticking out, so it's not going to affect our skin or irritate us. So I've then taken all my lengths of wire here, and this end where I attach my wires together with all my wraps, put that down through the center of the disc, and then I distributed all the rest of the wires along the disc like this. So I put 4 along the top row, and I just placed them in the middle. And then I put 3 along the bottom row here, in the middle, but just slightly to the left. So you can see there's obviously one less wire there than up at the top one. So I just left this slot down here free. So that's how you want to set up the disc. And then what we need to do is start our braid, but I want to just do a little section of braid with just the wire here before I start adding in the beads. So what we need to do is, I'm going to start with my top left one here, and we need to take that, release it from the disc. And I also like, every time I move my wires, you'll see that as well, I like to smooth out my wire, because obviously as we move it and then place it down in our slots, it's going to get a little bit bent or misshapen. So instead of being straight or having like a nice curve, so I just smooth it out every time I move it. It's just a nice habit to get into. I'm going to bring this down to the side. So the top left one goes down over to the left side of the center there, and just place it in that slot. So we now have 3 on the top and 3 on the bottom. And then you can see the slot that I just freed up, the one that's directly opposite on the bottom is this outer one here, so the furthest left one. I'm going to take that, release it, and then we need to start swapping over our wires from the top to the bottom and the bottom to the top. So I'm going to take that bottom left one, bring it over the middle and up to the top in that empty slot that I just freed up by moving this wire out to the side. And then I have my free slot down here. We now need to fill that one up. So I'm going to take the next one that's next to the one that I just placed in, so basically the neighbour to that one, release it, bring it across the middle, and then place it down in the empty slot. Then I'm going to move to the neighbour to that one here, over towards the right, just smooth it out, bring it across the middle and over to the top, and into the empty slot that we just freed. Take the next one, it's the neighbour to that one, towards the right, smooth it out, over the middle and down into the empty slot on the bottom there. The very next one, this is the last one on the bottom row. Bring it across to the top in the empty slot. And again, the next one over, the neighbour, going to release that one. Just smooth it out. Bring that down into the empty slot that I just freed up down here. So this is now what it looks like. And then now what I'm going to do is take the wire that I put out to the left side here, so it's on its own. I'm going to take that and release that. Again, smooth it out. Then I'm going to bring it across the middle. So all the wires that are now swapping over the middle there, across of all of them, out to the opposite side, so out to the right side here, and just place it in the same slot but on the opposite side. And that's now that position. Now what we need to do is basically start this whole thing over again. So I just freed up the slot on this side, so what I need to do is fill that in. I'm going to go back to the top left one, the one that I started out with as well, bring that out to the side and just place it in there. And then I need to fill in the gap or the slot there that I just freed up with this one, which means I need to do the straight opposite one. So that's the bottom left one. I'm going to take that, bring it up to the top. And then we start the whole process of swapping over the top and the bottom ones again. And you always go to the neighbour towards the right side. Smooth it out, bring that down, put it into the empty slot. Take the next one over, bring it up into the empty slot that we just freed up. Take the next one, bring it into the empty slot on the bottom here. And the last one on the bottom. Bring that up, and we now have 3 on the top and now 2 on the bottom. So that means the empty slot that I just freed up is the one here on the bottom, the furthest right one. To fill that back in, I need to take the wire here that's on the right side and bring that straight down and put in that empty slot just there. And there we go, that's basically one full go around again. And then all you want to do now is keep repeating this for a little while. So that means put something in that slot here that we just freed up from bringing it down, I need to do the opposite one over here. So from the left side, bring it over to the right side. And I also like to work with my wire, so kind of shape it as I go, instead of just pulling it like I would with cord. I like to just shape it a bit, put it in the place where I want it to sit, put it in that empty slot, and now we start all over again. So the top left one comes out to the side, the one that we just freed up. And basically what you can see is it's almost like your wires are chasing each other all the time. So we're constantly filling up the empty slot that we just freed up with the next wire that we need to use. So I'm going to do this for a little while, maybe a few centimeters or so. So we have a little section of braid that we can then use at the end, how we want to finish it off, before I then need to start adding in some beads as well. So now I made that little section of just the braid here on the back side. You'll be able to see it coming out there from the disc. And it's just a few centimeters. So now what I want to do is actually start incorporating some beads into it as well. And then I'm in this position here where I'm basically going to start my next round. I've got both my wires out to the side, so that means I've got 2 at the top and then 3 at the bottom here, and I'm ready for my next wire. It's going to be the down on the bottom left one there. So that's the next wire that I'm going to take, and that's actually the first one I'm going to also add a bead to. Now what I'm going to do is add my beads as I go, just because that's what I prefer. You could preload your beads onto all your lengths of wire here, and then say do a little spiral on the end to keep them on there. But personally I don't really like doing that, because like I said, I like to smooth out my wire as I go, and if I have that spiral on the end and then beads on my wire, it's going to kind of prevent me from doing that. So I prefer to put my beads on one at a time as I go, but it's completely up to you. So I release that wire here, and then I'm going to take my first bead and add it onto it, and like that, let it drop all the way down. And then what we need is for the bead, when I bring this wire across the top to go to the top side of the disc there to fill in that gap, then what we need to make sure is that the bead sits on top of the wire that's crossing over all the ones in the middle there. So the one that's coming out to the right side, it needs to sit just on top of that. Then place the wire in the slot on the top, and then I need to take my next wire, so that's the one on the top there, the neighbour to the one I just placed in, to fill in the empty gap on the bottom now. To this one I'm then not going to add a bead. We're only going to basically do it on every other one, on every row. So this one I just bring over the middle and down like that into the empty slot on the bottom. And now the next one I take is this one here, the neighbour to that one, so the middle one out of the 3 bottom ones. This one again I want to then add a bead onto, so I release my wire, make sure I smooth it out before I add my bead, then let my bead drop all the way down, and then as I'm placing, bringing my wire over the top of the middle here, over up to the top empty slot that I need to place it into. Again, I'm making sure that my bead sits on top of that wire that's going out to the side. So there we go. That's now 2 beads. The next one, the neighbour on the top one, the top row there. Smooth out your wire, bring it down into the empty slot on the bottom, and then I need to take my next one on the bottom row, smooth it out first of all, grab the end and then put your bead onto that. So again, you can see here this is every other one that I'm adding a bead to. And then again, make sure it's placed on top of that wire going out to the right side, bring it across the middle and place it on in the empty gap on the top there. So there we go. That's now all my beads attached in this on this row here. So the next step is where we need to take the right one out to the right side there, bring it down into the empty slot down here on the bottom, because we only have the 2 wires. So I'm going to grab that, smooth it out, and then bring it down, just like all the other times where we just did it with the braid. Now we need to take the one from the left side, release that, smooth it out, and then we need to bring this over the middle over to the right side to fill in the slot that we just freed up. And the only difference here is you want to make sure when you do this, this wire now needs to sit on top of the beads. So make sure that your beads haven't like scooted up further up down the wire there. So for instance, if this one had ended up there, make sure all your beads that you've added are sat right down where they need to be, where all the wires are crossing over. So I'll bring this over. Again, I like to shape it in place with my fingers into the empty slot. And then we need to take the top left one again to bring that out to the side to fill in the empty slot there that we just freed up. And that's one full go around. And now we've gotten to the next row, so I need to take my bottom left one to fill in the empty slot up here that I just freed. And again, this is then the same as before. This is the one we want to add a bead to again. So this is always the pattern that you want to add your beads onto in the braid here. So now obviously you're going to find there's a bit more spacing from where your wire is coming out up till where the bead needs to sit. So what you got to just be aware of is that when you then place this wire over, you might want to not drop your bead first and then do it, because the bead is going to kind of want to nestle on the outside and the side of the braid there. What you want is, it's going to bring it up. I just like to hold my bead as I'm moving the wire, and then once I brought the wire all the way so that the wire is touching the wire that's going out to the right side there, that's coming across the top of them, then I let the bead drop and then bring my wire up in that top slot that's empty. And then that is going to, again, the bead itself is going to sit on top of this wire that's coming out to the side, to the right side. Take the neighbour from the top there, and that is the one that on the previous row that had a bead on it. So you just want to make sure that bead still stays below this wire is going out to the side. Bring that down. The next one, the neighbour here in the bottom row, smooth it out, and this one also needs a bead, because remember it's every other one we're adding a bead to in every row. But just remember that it's every time you're using the wires from the bottom row here. Again, before I let it drop all the way down, I'm just going to bring my wire up towards the middle to make sure it touches the wire that's going out to the side, and then I drop down my bead so it sits on top of the wire out to the right side there. So there we go. Then I take the neighbour to that. Again, making sure the bead that's on that, the first one we added on the first row there, the last one on that row, make sure it stays underneath, and then you bring the wire over down to the bottom to fill in the empty gap. And the last one here on the bottom row, release it, and again you want to add a bead onto this as well. Like I said, it's on the bottom row, we want to add a bead to them all every time we move them now. Bring this across a little bit before you release the bead so it lands on top of the wire that's going out to the side, and then place it in the empty gap on the top. So there we go, that's now the second row of beads that we've added. And then take my right one that's going out to the side, bring that down just like the regular braid. And then to basically cage these beads in place so they're going to stay where they are, that's where we then take the one from the left side, bring it across the top of those beads and out to the right side, the empty slot that we just freed up there with the one that we brought down. And then you now have 2 rows of beads added. And it's going to sit really nicely like that, where you have 3 rows, in this case with the amount of wires that I'm using here, you have 3 beads on each row. That's then separated out by kind of a bare wire in between each bead. And every row is going to be the exact same. And that's basically how you want to add in your beads. So keep going like this, bring the next one up to the side. And you just want to keep with the regular braid, like I showed you, where you just add in your beads like I just showed you now. So keep doing this until you reach the length that you want your beaded section to be. And then I'm going to show you the next step. So I've now kept repeating the same thing here, adding in my beads in my braid as well, until I reach the point where I feel like that section is long enough. So it's going to come out looking something like this. So this beaded section you want to be long enough, and then what we need to do now is continue, just finish off the braid here, just like I started it out with just a bit of braid without the beads. So I've just ended up where I'm kind of ready to go around the next time, and if I were to add in beads, I would be taking this bottom one, add a bead and then bringing it up. Instead of adding the bead, all we do is go back to just making the braid without the beads here. So, like I said, this is the next one I need to take. I'm just going to take that without adding a bead, bring it up to that empty slot on the top, place it in, then grab the next one from the top, so the neighbour there, that just comes down into the empty slot on the bottom. And then this one, you would also normally add a bead in the beaded section, but again, we just don't add that bead. We just bring it up into the empty slot, the neighbour on the top there comes down, and then the last one on the bottom then goes up. So there we go. And then I take the one on the right side, bring it down on that into that empty slot that we just freed up there, and then I break the left side comes over all of these, and this is where you're then going to see the braid starting to form again without the beads. So that comes over to that empty slot there, and then we bring the top left one down to the side of that empty slot that we just freed up there. And then we're starting the section of just the braid. Now you're going to then find the braid is going to naturally singe in here after a couple of goes around, just like it did. It's obviously here down here you can see it's a bit narrow because here the beads add that extra spacing to it. So you just want to keep doing this for a little section, just long enough length that we have long enough length here to be able to finish it off. So now that I made that little section there, I can take all my wires here, my braid off the board, off the Kumihimo disc, and all you have to do, because this is wire, you don't need to worry about just letting them go and it'll unravel. Like say if you use cord, you would have to make sure the braid here wouldn't unravel. Because it's wire, you don't need to worry about that, because you can see it just stays in place. So this is what we've ended up with then. So you have your braid with all your beads, and if you find that when it's coming out of the hole in the middle of your disc and it's a little bit curved, what you can just do is, because it's wire, just straighten it out a little bit, work against the curve there, and you can easily straighten it out to get a nice and straight piece. Obviously on the opposite hand you could also give it a bit of a curve if you want it to sit, say, like a neckline piece, but that's completely up to you. So now that we have this, what we need to do is finish off both ends here, and I'm going to do that in the exact same way. So how I'm going to finish off my ends here is just using some ribbon ends that look like this. So they have two sides and kind of like a crocodile mouth, where you put the end of your braid inside of that, and also has some little claws there on the end. It's going to help grip onto it. I'm going to be using this, and you just want to use whichever width of ribbon end that's going to fit onto your braid. So you might have used other materials here, or you might have made it wider by using more wires. Then you're just going to need to make sure you use the right size of the ribbon end. So we need to use this, and the first thing I'm going to do is get some wire cutters out here, because we obviously need to cut this down so we can actually get the very end inside that ribbon end, because I want it to sit just after where my beads stop. So we can use the ribbon end itself to measure again, see where we want it to sit, to make sure I cut it in the right place. So somewhere around here will be good. And then all you do is, like I said, decide where you want to cut it, and then you want to go from one side, go all the way across the braid, and just take one wire at a time, or a couple of wires at a time, go all the way across and cut it to the other side. So we get all this excess off of it, and obviously the ends of the wire, because we don't need that for anything now. Not to finish it off in this way anyway. So just cut it all through here, like that. And then the ribbon end is going to fit just perfectly on the end of that. But what I first want to do before I actually clamp it down, because what you do is you take some pliers and clamp it down, I also want to add some glue, because that's going to really add the extra security as well. So the glue that I'm going to use is my E6000 here. I like to use this because it dries clear, so if anything spills out on the side of the ribbon end, for instance, then you won't really be able to see it because it dries clear. But also it's a really strong glue, so it's going to really add the strength and durability to the piece. And I just usually use a toothpick to apply it with. Get some of my toothpick, just a bit. We don't need too much, because obviously we're going to clamp it down, so there's not going to be that much space in there. But we just want enough glue to coat it on the sides. So put it in there, go up and down the sides, so it'll basically grab on to the wire at the end of the braid there. It's just for that extra security, and you kind of actually want to make sure you don't put too much, because it's just going to come spilling out anyway. Or something like that. And I also always like to just put a little bit on the very end of the braid itself, just on both sides there, because then they'll adhere together really nicely. Something like that. And once you're happy with that, you can then take the ribbon end, place it on top of the end of your braid there, Then I'm going to take a pair of flat nose pliers or chain nose pliers, and I like to hold the piece in my hand while using 2 fingers here, one on each side of the ribbon end, just to try and hold it in place, because it can move around a little bit, sliding around while you're working with it. And then before I clamp it down, I don't go in one place and clamp it all the way down. Before I clamp it down completely, I like to just go into one place on one end and do gentle presses, and then I go back and forth and gently get it closer and closer. And then when I feel like I'm really close to have it all the way down, I like to just double check it to see if it's sitting straight on the end of the piece here, or if it's moved, if it's slid to one side, then you got a chance to just correct it. But if you're happy with it, how it sits, then I go in and do the final squeeze, put some pressure in there, and do that all the way over. And there we go. And I also make sure I go in from the sides, because otherwise I want to make sure that that part there isn't too open. So just like that. So that's all you do to add the ribbon in there. And obviously you want to do the exact same thing on the other side. Let the glue dry, and then you have these little loops on the end of the ribbon end to then attach whatever findings you want to use. So using jump rings to do that obviously as well. So I now added ribbon ends on both ends of my braid here, and also my findings. And then all I have to do is really shape this piece, because obviously right now it's flat and straight. So you can either shape this around something you have that's the size and shape you want it to be, or you can just use your hands and fingers and just put gentle curves in there. And don't go into one place and just make a bend, because that'll make it out of shape. What you need to do is just gently go from side to side and gradually put more and more of a curve into it, until we then obviously get the ends to basically face towards each other. Now personally I prefer to make my bracelets more oval rather than round. I find it seems to fit better because our wrists aren't really round, they're more of an oval shape. But then also it has a tendency to flip around less while you're wearing it, so have the clasp come around to the front. It tends to do that more when they're round, whereas if they're oval, they tend to stay in place more, I think. So keep shaping it here until we have a nice shape and the two ends are getting close to each other, so we can then obviously use the clasp to fasten it up. So there we go. And then this is the bracelet. So it gives a really nice effect. It's quite a simple looking bracelet, but at the same time, obviously depending what materials you use, you can really make it look so different every time you make one. So that's what it looks like with the materials that I've used here. Of course you can use whatever you want to, but it's quite a simple technique. Just a Kumihimo braid here where we're adding beads just with wire instead of cord. So I really hope you enjoyed this tutorial, and thank you very much for watching. Hello there everyone. Today I want to show you how to make this flat wire Kumihimo bracelet using 2 colours of wire. And with this technique we can achieve this look where we have one of the colours running through the whole middle of the bracelet, and then the other colour is the border on both sides there. So in this case I'm just working with a copper and a silver wire to give it that nice contrast and mixed metal look. So this is what you can achieve. So if you want to learn how to make this, then keep watching. So these are the things